It is episode number 56 of the Gashouse Gang. Welcome in, everybody. My name is Matt Pauley. I am alongside of Bernie Miklasz today. It is our Friday edition. We are presented by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Bernie, great to see you as always. And for those of us who are watching, of course, some of us listen at night on KMOX or listen via podcast, but you're rocking a pretty solid slew hat right now. I like that look for you.
I've had it, I've worn it, but not for a while. And the Billikens are playing really well. It's good to see them coming on. And so I thought, let's get the hat on to acknowledge that the positive turn of events.
I wasn't planning on talking about this, but very quickly before we get into the Cardinals, it is so good for the city when the Billikens are playing well. There's something when the who's who of St. Louis shows up to Billikens games when they're playing well. Like, that is the place to be. They're not quite to that point yet, but that is the team in St. Louis that it feels like it's so good for the city when they're playing well.
There's no doubt about it. And the thing of it is, Chaffetz Arena is fantastic. And when it opened and you just walk in there the first time, I was like, this is like basically for SLU. This is like perfect. I mean, there's not a bad seat in the house. The sight lines are great. It's got just a wonderful atmosphere. And when their team has been good, you're right. It has become a major event. You know, when Coach Majerus had this thing going, it was a major event. Those games were great, and fans couldn't get enough of it. And Chaffetz was a fantastic home court. So yeah. They and this is not meant as a shot because I'm a huge SLU fan. I love the new coach, but SLU's got the great arena. They just need to have a team that can rise to the level of the arena. You know, and again, I'm not. That's not meant as a negative, but when you get both of those things going together at the same time, it's fun.
It's a lot of fun. For those of you who are watching us live, you can always leave comments on wherever you happen to be watching us, and we'll try to address those as we go along. Bernie, I wanted to, and also, by the way, because we're going to start by kind of jumping off one of Bernie's videos recently, you really need to be subscribed to Bernie's YouTube channel at The Bernie Show. It does 1 to 2 videos every single day, going deep on a single topic. I absolutely love taking in what Bernie does every day, and I think you will as well. Bernie, you kind of jumped off something that you had with Kevin yesterday and turned it into a video, and I thought it was a really interesting conversation about should the Cardinals potentially trade Alec Burleson? And I wanted to jump off that and turn it into who on the Cardinals from a position player standpoint should they not trade. But I want to tell you a story to start off, because this I had one of those moments this past year when hosting the postgame show. Every once in a while, I can lose my cool a little bit. And we had one of those nights where the Cardinals lost a really tough game, and Burleson got pinch hit because of a lefty-righty situation. And I could not believe the number of people who called and texted into my postgame show saying, Alec Burleson is the best hitter on the team. You should never pinch hit the best hitter on the team. And I pushed back on that in a very strong way. Like, it doesn't matter if you stink offensively. It doesn't matter if Paul Goldschmidt would have been the best player on the team offensively, and he's hitting 198. Like, you pinch hit him in a situation. Like, I don't understand the whole sliding scale of best player, best hitter on the team, so you don't do this. So when you started this conversation, I kind of had flashbacks in that moment because of what that night's postgame show turned into. But it was an interesting situation last year.
Yeah, and the thing of it is, he had 3 really outstanding months in a row: June, July, most of August. He wasn't good early in the season. He wasn't good in the final month of the season. In fact, the offense just kind of dried up in the final month, which is fine. But again, you'd sort of like to see him be more consistent over 6 months. You can say that about a lot of Cardinals players. But it's funny. I spent 2 years in comment sections, also writing and talking on my old show at KFNS, defending Burleson from attacks. You know, people just, and again, this is probably a vocal minority, but they were always ripping Burleson his first couple years, always. And I'm like, look, will you give it some time? The guy's a tremendous contact hitter, yada, yada, yada. So I do this video yesterday, and I think some of the fine people who subscribe to the YouTube channel like interpreted it as me saying, in effect, get rid of a Burleson. And I wasn't saying that. The premise was something that John Mozeliak said at the winter warm-up, which is like, he said, no, we don't. Bill DeWitt has said we don't have to. If we keep Arenado, we don't have to cut payroll, and I want to hold on to our pitching. But he offered to you guys, he offered something along the lines of like, actually, I might be more willing to, trade a position player. So that got me thinking, like, well, who? Because you're already trying to trade Arenado. It ain't gonna be Contreras. He wants to stay. So then that takes us down a line of potential position players, none of whom really make a lot of money. Although Nootbaar and Donovan will be, relatively speaking, they're going to take a jump up to 2 million plus, 2.5 million, whatever, maybe 3 million. So I was just trying to identify who a candidate might be, and Burleson can't hit left-handed pitching, so he is one-dimensional in that regard. He's very good against right-handed pitching. His power started to come alive last year. There are teams that need DHs, and look, more than 70% of the plate appearances hitters go through in a season, it's a right-handed pitcher facing him. So if you have a glaring need for a left-handed bat and a slot to DH, first base, maybe a little outfield, he would be an attractive candidate. I'm not saying get rid of him. I'm saying, well, if Mo's serious about this, who would have some appeal on the market? And so I got into it that way, and I thought it was an interesting conversation. But it's funny how Burley's a beloved guy now, because I had some people, and I'll shut up after this, and I apologize. I had some people kind of coming back at me, says, no, you got to trade Nootbaar because Burley's a better hitter than Nootbaar. No, he's not. Okay, no, he's not. Nootbaar's problems, he's not on the field enough. Burleson is not a better hitter than Nootbaar. One of the things that's great about Nootbaar, he's a left-handed hitter who actually is solid against left-handed pitching.
Yeah.
So there's no big platoon disadvantage. You don't have to worry about his defense. You don't have to worry about that. He draws walks. Burleson doesn't. I didn't want to get into all that. But it sort of brought it home to me, because it's just like, well, wait, no. I like Burleson too. He had a good year last year. He's not a better hitter than Nootbaar, but people can believe what they want to believe. The facts don't matter. Whatever. It's all good with me. We're talking baseball.
I really like Alec Burleson. I hope he sticks around. I think, but at the same time, we've talked a lot, Bernie, about the necessity to create runway for younger players. And if Nolan Arenado is still around, you're just looking for a way to get everybody in there. I think if you are overwhelmed by an offer for Burleson because a team out there looks at, you look at, it's always a slippery slope when you look at minor league numbers and try to project that to the big leagues, because it's two completely different worlds. But if you do look at Burley's minor league numbers and look at what he did against lefties there and things like that, maybe you can squint a little bit and find a reason to think that it's going to get better. And maybe it will. He's still a relatively young guy. Maybe the splits will get better moving forward. There was it was fun after I had that post-game show last year. Chris Tuna, who's one of the PR guys, does a really good job for the Cardinals. He came to me the next day. He said, you know what, you should probably look at Burley's numbers against lefties for the last month or so. And I don't remember the date, but the last month he had done well. So he had like a month where he was hit okay against lefties. But historically in the big leagues, he has not done that. No.
And I've had people lecture me, well, you hit lefties in the minor leagues. Well, that's the minor leagues. It's not the major leagues. So anyway, no, he's got his pluses clearly. But in one of the points I made, and I'm not trying to do the video all over again, but one of the points I made was that there's a logjam forming, because the Cardinals have some minor league outfielders who are getting closer and closer to St. Louis, and Chase Davis being one of them. They also, if they give him an opportunity, and I'm not convinced they will, but Matt Koperniak had a great season last year. He's deserving of a chance to play. So my point is that they could move a Burleson, and they have other people ready to go. And then even next year, they'll even have more people ready to go. So anyway, that was the premise of what I was talking about. Just trying to identify who Mo might have been talking about. Might have been talking about.
Yeah, and what I really want to do with this is get into what
Sure.
players are untouchable. We'll get to that coming up in just a moment. I know we've already had some comments on that, but before we go any further, the Gashouse Gang is presented by Saliga Heating and Cooling.
You know, during this rugged stretch of weather, it makes me, my wife, we're a Saliga family for 16 years, calling them when we need their help. But everything worked beautifully. The heat was perfect. Our house was warm and snug and secure. And it's times like that you're like, man, I'm glad that we have Saliga to turn to, because I was thinking about, you know, people that were having problems with their heating during that time, and it happens. It's not fun to go through. That's why one of the reasons, many reasons, we love Saliga Heating and Cooling, because this independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer gives you peace of mind because they're so good. They take care of your stuff. And we're in this Priority Club, which is a maintenance program. And this is this kind of really, really brutal weather in terms of the cold. That's exactly why you should consider being part of the Priority Club maintenance program. There's a lot of benefits, but maybe the top of the list is that, hey, you know, everything's working great before it gets really cold or really hot in the summer. And you have peace of mind in knowing that you're all set to take on the weather, whatever it might be. So anyway, go to SaligaHeatingandCooling.com. They've been doing this since 1927. Dan Saliga's fourth generation owner operator, and they have that American Standard equipment, which is the gold standard. But go to SaligaHeatingandCooling.com to find out more, and including the phone number, SaligaHeatingandCooling.com.
It's the Gashouse Gang presented by Saliga Heating and Cooling alongside of Bernie Miklasz. I'm Matt Pauley. Wanted to get, and we've gotten some good comments on this as well, Bernie, but wanted to touch on, is there anybody on the Major League roster that is just absolutely untouchable that you would not trade? And of course, we still need to have a little bit of common sense in this. If you would trade anybody if a crazy deal came at you, but I got somebody a legitimate deal. Is there anybody on that Major League roster that you would not move on from? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody on the team, but my list starts and stops at Mason Wynn.
Right. No, there's not much more to be said. And you know what's amazing to me, Matt, is that Cardinals fans definitely appreciate him, and they know what they have. A player that special in his first real major league season, and just everything about him is impressive. Everything. Can he get better? Yeah, because he played last season at age 22. He's got a lot of great baseball ahead of him. But, you know, MLB Network's doing this, you know, best players now things where they go position by position. And Wynn did not make their list of the top 10 shortstops. May I just say to MLB Network, which I watch and respect and like, but may I just say politely, or maybe not so politely, are you people crazy? Have you lost control of your senses? See, this is what happens when a team like the Cardinals is prominent on the national stage, and then they sort of go down and they're not as prominent. It's easy to overlook a young player who was so great, like Mason Wynn. They got people on that top 10 shortstop list. I'm like, are you serious? Especially when you factor in, you know, some of the issues with those shortstops. So I love this because Mason Wynn is going to get better and better and better, and the people who are too ignorant to realize how great he is, they're going to know it soon enough. He's special.
Yeah, it's so we got a couple responses here. Brendan says Wynn, Walker, Nootbaar, Gorman. Nootbaar and Gorman would be sold at low value. We definitely lose the trade. I still believe Walker will be a star, and Wynn's play speaks for itself. Zachary says Wynn, Burley, Walker, and Gorman. Another one says don't move Quinn, Wynn, Walker, Hentz, Weatherholt. Good return if needed. Nootbaar and Donovan. Mason Wynn, that's the list. Yeah, an interesting thing that I was told a couple of years ago, and I don't know how much this is really relevant to today, Bernie, but Craig Mish, who covers baseball in Miami with the Marlins and does a fantastic job with it, he told me 2 years ago that the Cardinals could have had any starting pitcher from the Marlins, not named Sandy Alcantara, if they would have been willing to trade Lars Nootbaar and the Cardinals were completely unwilling to trade Nootbaar. Now, I don't think that's the case now. Obviously, Skip was over there with the Marlins at the time, and there were some other things. And some of those guys that we really viewed as being high-level starters for the Marlins have fizzled out a little bit since then. But at the time, I thought that was a very notable thing that Craig Mish said.
Yeah, it's interesting. But at that time, Nootbaar was viewed as a rising star. And the thing of it is, it's not like he's fallen off the face of the earth. He just hasn't been – in 2022, he was outstanding. And his numbers are still good. But because he's had so many absences, it disrupts his rhythm, his timing, everything at the plate. Because the more he plays, the better he is. So I'm not going to rip the Cardinals for not trading him at that time. I'm just not. It's so easy in retrospect to go back and play fantasy general manager. It's easy after the fact. Well, they should have done this. Okay. These are some of the same people that will also tell you that they're the ones that will harp about Randy Arozarena and Adolis Garcia and any Cardinal goes somewhere else and does better. Oh, I said they never should have traded him. Yeah. Okay.
That's that's the one that gets me. And I know I'm not trying to paint all Cardinals fans into a corner. And so
we're talking about a percentage. We're talking about a percentage.
But what I can't grasp at all, Bernie, is the same people who just destroy the Cardinals for those moves are the same people that want nothing to do with Nolan Gorman and want them to get traded. What's a higher percentage chance you're going to get something good for Gorman or Gorman right now, or Gorman eventually is going to turn it around and go do something for somebody else? Even if a year from now you trade Gorman and you just don't get much for him, you have to give him the opportunity to develop into who we thought he was going to become.
Exactly. And we're all guilty, including me, of recency bias. From June 5th to the end of last season, he was horrible. He hit 170, very little power. He struck out 40% of the time. But I'm going to do a video on this probably next week because I wanted to go about this a different way. If you look at the first 83% of Nolan Gorman's major league plate appearances, the body of work, it's above average. It's good. There were some slumps in there, but it's good. 83% of it for a guy that young who is a free swinging type. He made some real progress, including drawing walks. He's always going to strike out. So people who are the strikeout fetishists who think, even if a guy hits 30, 35 home runs, they're going to have a fit if he strikes out 150 times or whatever. I like to say on these videos when I like to be a smart aleck and say, I kind of wish it was 1967 again, because that means I would be, 8 or 9 years old. So I would have a lot to look forward to. But it's not. It's 2025. Baseball's changed. Anyway, 83%, the first 83% of his plate appearance, big leagues, good. Bottom line, good. Not perfect, good. The last 17% were as bad as it gets. So when we look at Nolan Gorman, do you view 83% body of work as having more meaningful than 17%? I think to any logical person, the answer is obvious. I would not trade Nolan Gorman, and I would not trade Jordan Walker. Now, the word untouchable takes in a lot of ground. But if we're just talking about, well, it's time to move on from Walker, let's put him out there. It's time to move on from Gorman. No, absolutely not. And the idea that some people want to give up on these guys already is just preposterous to me, But again, I've learned the last couple of years, the Cardinals 22nd in winning percentage in Major League Baseball. Basically, everybody, a percentage of the fan base, I don't know what it is. It's certainly not all the fans. They're mad at everybody and everything. So if Jordan Walker, who didn't even get a fair shot from the Cardinals last year, has a bad year, well, get rid of him. He's a bust. I had a guy telling me that last night. He's a bust. Gorman, who was having an incredible season, and then he fell off the cliff. He's a bust. He's not a bust. He's not. So pulling the parachute on those guys, and then you're going to have to sit back and watch when they find it somewhere else, in part because you haven't had the coaching or instruction or the teaching to get them out of these ruts they're in. You didn't even have Walker prepared to be in the major leagues. But it's always get rid of the player. No. I'm not going to get rid of the player. Not guys that young who have shown what they're capable of doing. They need to do it more consistently. But if anybody thinks like this is some new thing in the majors, oh my gosh, you can look at Hall of Fame players who were awful in their like second year, their first year. Awful. People just have no sense of perspective, and that's what bugs me, and that's why I bark about it. But again, I know it's a minority percentage of Cardinals fans who act this way. The greater percentage is more reasonable.
I think there's another side of this as well, Bernie, because we're in a day and age right now in baseball, talking about baseball changing. Guys are getting pushed to the big leagues a lot faster. They're getting to the big leagues as unrefined products, and that development continues in the big league, where if you're going back 20, 30, 40 years, you get to the big leagues and you're kind of who you are. Not that you can't get better, but you're ready. So somebody who's used to the game being played in a certain way, where there's an expectation of what guys are going to be when they get to the major leagues, and then comparing that to right now, I think there is a little bit of a disconnect there, because they're nowhere near a finished product the way guys are being pushed these days.
And I think Walker's a great example of that. And again, I'm not ripping the Cardinals for doing it, because again, I think it's really easy in retrospect. Well, they brought him up there too soon. Okay. No, it's not that. It's not the fact that they brought him up in 2023, and that was just flat wrong. The problem is that they didn't take the time to prepare him to play major league right field. They just didn't. And they needed to move him to right field as soon as they got Arenado. They didn't do that. But they had a reason to believe he would come up in the big leagues and hit. They maybe took for granted the fact that, the defensive problems was pretty bad. But the dude had one of the best seasons in franchise history by a 21-year-old rookie. And I did something on that recently too. You would be surprised how Walker's rookie season measured up offensively to in the history of the franchise, 21-year-old rookies. He's right there with some of the biggest names in franchise history. And I'm not saying he's going to be those guys, but I am saying it is absolutely insane to declare him a bust. It is bonkers. Okay. Last year was regrettable, forgettable. I think Brent Brown's you were down there, man. He seems really fired up about some of the early lessons he's gotten from the new hitting coach. It's like we've never seen Jordan Walker this animated. He is really re-energized and in a great frame of mind after a really disappointing season last year.
It's the Gashouse Gang. We are presented by Saliga Heating and Cooling, alongside of Bernie Miklasz. I'm Matt Pauley. Bernie, I've got, I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory, but it's just, I'm convinced of something. I'm 100% convinced of something, because when John Mozeliak says, well, if we don't trade Nolan Arenado, we don't need to find salary relief elsewhere, and he almost makes it seem silly, the idea of trading an Eric Fetty or Ryan Helsley. Like, that's not something that we're going to do. I was around people at Winter Warm-Up. I was around people on Cardinals Caravan. They're not going to say it. They're not going to sit here and raise expectations for fans. But if you look at what's actually happening, yes, there was a mandate to lower payroll, and that's why Paul Goldschmidt's not around anymore, and Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn were allowed to walk away. But I think this team believes that they are going to be significantly better than the outside world is saying this year. And I think we're seeing that the things that they are doing kind of go along with that belief.
I'm keeping an open mind on that. I've said,
but Bernie, let me pause. That's not me saying I believe that. That's me saying I think the organization believes
right. And I keep an open mind on it, because you could see a scenario, and listen, I don't get into happy talk, but you can see a scenario where things look dramatically different if Walker and Gorman take off, if Nootbaar stays in the lineup for 135, 140, 145 games, if Wilson Contreras playing a full season of first base puts up the numbers that we know that he can put up. He's been an excellent hitter. I read one of the dumbest blogs I've ever read, like in the history of my life, the other day, saying like, well, Contreras, like he's never even hit this, or he's never hit 30 home runs, and he's like basically trashing the Cardinals for holding on to him. Or so. It's like, my goodness. The Fangraphs has a really good, search engine. Put in Contreras like the last, I don't know, just as 2 years as a Cardinal, and put in 500 at bats as a minimum, and go ahead and see where he ranks among major league hitters.
Yeah.
But so anyway, this stuff just drives me nuts, and maybe it shouldn't. But what can I say? They have some players with talent. They really have players with talent. It's just they haven't been able to put the set talent together as consistently as they should. And so if all of a sudden that takes off, if maybe the new hitting coach makes a difference, I don't know. There's a lot of factors that are not beyond reason, like where it's like, we're just like having this wild fantasy. No, I could see a scenario where they are better than expected, but they're also going to have to take care of the bullpen.
Yeah.
If they're serious about this, they're going to need they're going to need more weaponry down in the bullpen, even if they keep Helsley. So anyway, and I also think they're going to have to, if they really think they're going to be better than media and fans think, well, okay, you can prove it to us by if Quinn Matthews gets off to a great start in Memphis. You don't worry about, well, who goes.
Right.
He's put in your rotation. Period. If you're not willing to do that, then I have no reason to take you seriously when you talk about how you can be better than people think.
Yeah, I'm someone who leaves the door open for this team to be really good. I don't think you have to squint. It comes down to Walker and Gorman for me. If those guys take big steps forward and middle of the order run producers, they more than make up for what you didn't get out of Arenado and Goldschmidt last year. But I think to be fair about it, and I try to be fair on everything that I talk about it, there is just as much of there is a chance that those guys do take those steps forward. Bernie, there's just as equal of a shot that those guys are the exact same guys that they were this past year.
That's right.
And then the Cardinals, they may look more like who they were 2 years ago, if that's the case. So this is, man, the ceiling and the floor for this team has about as large of a differential as probably just about any team in baseball.
It's a great observation. No, that you're exactly right. And that's why I'm reluctant to make any kind of prediction yet, because first of all, the Cardinals have oversold the reset thing. The reset is down below with the farm system and player development and minor leagues and all that. That's where the reset's going. They've overstated the reset at the major league level because they're not really doing a full reset. They're not even close. So, in that context, it really does come down to the younger players who already have played a lot. They'll play like more this year, whether the arrow goes way up with them or it stays the same or it goes down. That's what it's going to come down to, really. Another guy's Ivan Herrera. If he shows that he can throw out runners better, well, by the way, the pitchers can help that out. People always leave them out of it for some reason. If he shows he's improved with his throwing and his timing behind the plate, getting rid of the throws quickly, and if he hits like crazy, that's another factor. Like, again, you can see some things where you say, like, well, it's not like it's nutty to think most of these things could happen, but I don't expect them to happen, but we'll see. That is what makes this team interesting, actually. It makes it intriguing. And then, what if you see a Quinn Matthews come up? Maybe JJ Weatherholt comes up after the All-Star break. I mean, things could get it could take there could be some really interesting turns during the season, or it could be more the same. You're right. You well said, my friend, about the ceiling and the floor. You're right. No, it's kind of nuts.
I thought your point about the bullpen, because we know that Ryan Helsley is who he is. You hope that Jojo Romero is the guy that he was for the first half of the season next year, and maybe they manage his workload a little bit differently to keep that longer. We saw Ryan Fernandez. You would hope that he takes another step forward. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about comments that Matthew Liberatore made where he talked about still wanting to be a starter, and the Cardinals are going to stretch him out. I'm fine. Stretch him out at the beginning of spring training. You try to find lightning in a bottle. But Bernie, one thing I've noticed with Libby is he is at his best when the role is defined. Mm-hmm. And the moment they make that decision, and I'm going to assume that Liberatore is going to be a relief pitcher this year. I don't think this whole starting thing is going to be for him this year. Maybe that's something that you legitimately revisit later on in his career. Whether it's 2 weeks into spring training or a week before the regular season starts, my desire when it comes to Liberatore is that they make him a relief pitcher and they just park him there for the year and they never futz around with him starting again for the rest of the season.
You're so right about the fact that he's never really had a defined role. They go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They did that with Zach Thompson too, who's another guy I think by this stage of his career could be a lot better, but they keep jerking him around. They did that with Palante until Palante finally said, no, I really want to be a starter. I think I'm better at it. And they went along with it, and they gave him some things to help him become a better starter. The thing with Libby that frustrates me is he's still very, very young, but he's never had a defined role, and I don't know exactly – I've never given up on the idea of him as a starter, but you know, I know I'm doing a lot of Cardinals bashing today, and it's not like I set out to do this, but it's relevant to the discussion. Libby has really good stuff, right? They've had how many years now? They brought him up in 2022, 23, 23, 3 years, parts of 3 seasons. No one in the major league staff, and this is where Chaim Bloom and his people will make a big difference. No one at the major league level has been able to figure out why Matthew Liberatore simply continues to get his skull beat in by right-handed hitters. He's got too much talent for that to happen over and over again. So it's either pitch design, it's either pitch sequencing. There is something to unlock there, and with some of the advanced stuff that Bloom and Cerfolio and this new regime they're going to be setting up. And I was listening to some guys from Baseball America talking about what the Cardinals are going to be doing that the Cardinals pitchers have not had the benefit of down in the minors. There's something, a lot still there with Libby. But yeah, I would say at the beginning, he should be a reliever. But I kind of feel bad for him because he's viewed as some kind of bust or failure, and no one will ever let him forget he was traded for Randy Rosarina. I don't think the Cardinals have done him well either. I really don't.
It's the Gashouse Gang. We are presented, Bernie, by our good friends over at Saliga Heating and Cooling.
You know, when I talk about their history, and thank you, you know, they've been serving St. Louis families since 1927, including the Miklasz family the last 16 years. And this independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer is, look, if you've been around since 1927 and you're still adding families, adding clients, you're still the ones that we all call, and your reputation is excellent. I mean, what the heck does that tell you? I joke about it. It's like, I don't really need to say anymore. I mean, you got to be great to have their track record. And we've learned that because they're extremely knowledgeable. They're 100% honest. They don't try to hustle you, talk you into stuff. They're prompt when they say they're going to show up. They're classy. They're professional. I mean, and they can solve problems, and they'll also look to save you money. They have the Priority Club maintenance program. I'm just going to tell you to check into it by going to SaligaHeatingandCooling.com. I'm not going to tell you to do it unless we've done it. We're in the Priority Club. It's a maintenance program that has worked very, very, very well on a number of fronts. Also, financing options are available, subject to credit approval. But you can find out everything about Saliga and that American Standard equipment and how they can help you just by going to SaligaHeatingandCooling.com. You see the phone number on your screen now. SaligaHeatingandCooling.com. Thank you.
Alongside of Bernie Miklasz, I'm Matt Pauley. This is the Gashouse Gang, as mentioned, brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Final few minutes of the program. Let's look ahead to what I think is always one of the best sports days on the calendar. This Conference Championship Sunday in the NFL. Very often you'll get 2 Super Bowl caliber games in one day. I don't know if this year is that. I don't totally believe in Washington as much as I love Jane Daniels. But let's go through these games. NFC Championship, Commanders and Eagles. AFC Championship game, Bills at the Chiefs on KMOX. Let's start with the NFC, Bernie. Are you with me that you don't give the Commanders much of a chance?
Well, you know, I'm looking at it from a point spread standpoint. It's tough to say that for me to say, yeah, I think Washington beats Philly outright because Philly has got a tremendous defense. Washington has not played a defense in the postseason that's anything close to Philly. Now, some people will say, well, wait a minute. They beat Philadelphia late in the season. It was kind of a weird game. They didn't have Jalen Hurts. I don't know that it really was foreshadowing of anything that will happen Sunday, except for the fact that Jaden Daniels was fantastic, which he is all the time. So here's why I do think the Washington Commanders have a chance. If you look at Philly's first 2 games, right, they beat Green Bay, and they beat them by 12, but Green Bay had a chance. They got that thing down to 1 score. So they had to really kind of fight to the end to beat Green Bay, despite having a 4-0 turnover advantage. Mm-hmm. And then they beat the Rams only by 6 points in the snow, which should not have favored the Rams. The Eagles had a 2-0 turnover edge, and they barely got by the Rams. The Rams had a chance to tie, win the game, their final possession. Washington has not turned the ball over yet in the postseason, and generally speaking, Daniels has kept his turnovers down really well. So if I were betting on this, I would take the Commanders in the points. It's +6 because I think it's going to be a close game. And it'll come down to whether Washington and Jalen Hurts is not the same. That's the other thing. I think it'll come down to whether Washington can do a reasonable job of containing Saquon Barkley. If you do like the Rams, you let him go off to, a couple of 70-yard touchdown runs, well, you're going to lose probably.
The game of more local interest, again, it'll be on KMOX. And this is, again, it looks like it's likely to be a fantastic matchup again. Bills and Chiefs being played in Kansas City. Feels like these teams play against each other in the playoffs or in the AFC Championship just about every year. In the regular season, the Bills tend to have success against Kansas City. In the postseason, the Chiefs tend to have success against the Bills. I just look at this game, and I kind of feel about this game the way I thought last week about the Buffalo-Baltimore game. This just looks like a fantastic matchup.
It does. And Josh Allen, it's him and Mahomes, their rivalry is really fascinating to me because Josh Allen is 4-1 against Mahomes in the regular season. He's 0-3 against Mahomes in the postseason. If you take the Mahomes games out, which you can't, Josh Allen is like 7-2 in the postseason. I mean, but he can't get to the Super Bowl because of Mahomes. So I think Buffalo's got a shot, but I'll say this, last week, Kansas City played a hell of a defense with Houston. Houston's really, really good defensively. And they found a way, the way the Chiefs do, to, kind of grind it out. They win ugly offensively, but they find ways to get points when they need to. But the other thing as I look at this too is road teams. I sent this in our text message chain. Road teams that won 12 or more games in the regular season are 3-15 straight up and 7-11 against the spread in their last 18 conference title games. And so the Commanders won 12 and the Bills won 13. So if you go on the road in a conference championship game, history tells you you're up against it. Also, top seeds in conference championships are 20-5 in the last 25 straight up. The Chiefs have covered 9 of their last 11 postseason games. So I would go with the Chiefs, but nothing would surprise me to say the least. But Allen's got a breakthrough against him in the playoffs at some point, right?
You would think so, but at the same time, anytime you bet against the Chiefs or think that the Chiefs, this has been the year where you go, okay, you know what, the Chiefs just weren't that impressive, and then they kind of turned it on in the final months of the regular season. They've done what they've needed to do in the postseason. Right. It feels like we're always looking for reasons to discount the Chiefs, and it's probably a bad way to go about things.
And I think Buffalo's defense can be exploited. I mean, the Ravens should have beat them last week. The Ravens moved the ball great. They made a lot of big plays. They just screwed some things up. So I don't think the Buffalo Bills have a great defense. It's a solid defense. One thing to look out for too, could the Bills perhaps change the anticipated script by running and running and running? They've been going with 6 offensive lineman sets a lot, and it's highly effective. So I wonder if the Bills are just going to come out and ground and pound with 6 offensive linemen. Steve Spagnuolo will find a way to adjust, but it's such a fascinating matchup. That was my point for bringing that up.
I guess the only thing I would say as we wrap up, if you lose that game and you took the ball out of the hands of Josh Allen, I think you're thinking about that one for a while.
They kind of took it out of his hands last week, though.
But you won.
He scored 2 touchdowns, but they didn't win because of him making passes. They ran and ran and ran on Baltimore, and he did some of the running.
That's Burleson Miklasz. I'm Matt Pauley. Bernie, have a great weekend. Enjoy Conference Championship Sunday, and we'll all be together coming up on Monday for our Cardinals Monday.
And I'll talk to you tonight on Sports Open Line, Friday night. That's right.
We've got Bernie on at 6:20 today. That's Burleson Miklasz. I'm Matt Pauley. This has been the Gashouse Gang presented by Saliga Heating and Cooling.